I've had the Sony A7 IV for just over 90 days now. I've used it for personal shoots, I've used it for client shoots. There's two things that I wish were a little bit different, but overall they're not a deal breaker for me. And I gotta say, I love this thing. So, quick background for you. I got into photography and videography back in 2020 during lockdown. I bought a camera on Black Friday, or the year before that, 2019, Canon M50. Really like that thing. I think it's one of the best starting out cameras you can get, and probably the best camera for most people. But anyway, that's not what this video is about. The A7 IV is almost a perfect camera. That's a bold statement, I know, but hear me out. 33 megapixels, 4K downsampled from 6K, 4K 60, 120 frames per second at 1080p. Phenomenal eye autofocus, making it almost harder to get a shot out of focus and into focus. Focus breathing compensation when it's paired with the right lens. Focus mapping to help maintain focus. A redesigned menu system, making it super easy to navigate. 10-bit 422, and no record limit. Now that's a lot of premium or close to premium features for a camera that's $2,500 for just the body, $2,700 for the body and the kit lens. Don't get me wrong, $2,700 is still a lot of money. But when compared to the flagships for like $3,500, $4,000, something like that, you're getting a great deal, I feel like, which is why I went with it. Now, like I said, I've used this on both photo shoots and video shoots. So here's some of the things that I liked and some of the things I didn't like. We'll start with photography. Honestly, every time I take this thing out, I am super happy with the results. The images are crisp, they're sharp, and because of the 33 megapixel resolution, I can crop in if I need to and not lose any quality. The eye autofocus, that is amazing, super quick, super sticky. I tested out a lot with my 1-year-old daughter who moves around, like a 1-year-old would. And I still was able to get most of the shots in focus. And when it comes to product photography, which is another thing I do a lot of, obviously it's easier to get something in focus for that because it's not moving around. But everything comes out super crisp. And like I said, with 33 megapixels, you can crop in and zoom in if you need to get an even closer shot. Another thing I really like is the mode dial. So it's super easy to go from photo to video, and as a hybrid shooter, that's something I do a lot of. I can switch from photo to video several times in the same shoot. I can do that without having to change my settings all the time. I've got what settings I know are in section number 1, what settings I know are in section number 2, or keep it in manual and kind of play it by the scenario. The dynamic range in this thing is unbelievable. So I know Sony has phenomenal dynamic range. I know their ISO, you can shoot it at crazy high ISO 12,000 and still have a really good looking picture. But after doing it myself, I never got to 12,000, but after actually playing around with it, it's insane. On both ends of the spectrum, I was able to shoot outside, no ND filter, super bright, and still recover the sky in post. Or, on the flip side, super low light scenarios, indoors, not the best lighting, and I was able to crank it up to ISO 2000 and still get really, really good images that I was able to use. ISO 2000 on a lot of other cameras, good luck. All right, on to the downside. The only issue I had so far with photo is outside in about, it was like 85, 87 degree weather. We were doing a photo shoot, which is only about an hour and a half or so. And twice the camera, I don't want to say it overheated, but it froze in the middle of taking a picture. And I couldn't do anything, couldn't click anything, couldn't get out of it. I had to pop out the battery, put it back in, turn the camera off, turn it back on, and then we were back up and running like nothing happened. It never came up with an overheating warning, which is why I don't want to say it was overheating, but feeling it, that thing was hot. So I don't know what the deal was there. I wonder if I had the flip out screen actually pulled out, if that would have made a difference, because I read that that actually makes a difference for video, and that's what I do, and it hasn't been an issue for that. So maybe for photography, that would have been a good call too. I don't know, but that's really the only issue that I had. It, stressful in the moment, but just pop out the battery, put it back in. Luckily, I didn't lose anything, and I was able to just get right back into it. Now for video, and I'm even more impressed with this than I was for photography. So the eye autofocus in video, insane, and in 4K too. So like I said, I'm coming from the M50, and that one 4K autofocus was just not usable. So actually having really, really good autofocus in 4K, that's reliable, huge. Now, so far, 100% of my videos have been shot in 4K. They come out crisp, they come out clean, I can crop in if I need to, I can scale up if I need to, and they're all shot in S-Cinetone as well. S-Log, S-Log 3, those are your flat color profiles. Everything will be super flat, and you have a ton of room for color grading in that, especially with 10-bit like this does. The dynamic range on here is excellent too. So a lot of times I've found myself shooting in low light scenarios again, and I don't have to be afraid to crank up that ISO and still have it looking sharp, still have it looking good, and have minimal noise. Now, the biggest complaint that most people have for this camera is that in 4K 60, it crops in at a 1.5x zoom. Basically, that means if you have a 24mm lens on there and you switch it into 4K 60, that 25mm is now going to work more like a 35-36mm. Yes, that's annoying, but if you plan ahead, which I know you can't do all the time, but if you do plan ahead and know that you need to use 4K 60 and you have the right lens, or you just do the conversion so you know what lens you need to pair it with, it's manageable. I know that sounds kind of like an excuse that somebody that sells the camera would say, but honestly, that's what I've been doing, and it hasn't been really much of an issue at all. Some fields, yes, you'll need a little bit more adjustment to do. So, like real estate videos, 24 turning into a 35, not good. You need a little bit more to play around with, or you're shooting in 1080, which if it's going on social media, people are looking at it on their phones, it's really not as big a deal as you think. Honestly, I think Sony had to do that. I think they had to put some kind of limitation on this camera and give it that 4K 60 crop, because otherwise it would be a tough sell for somebody to want to buy the A7S3, for example, which is the next level up. From a product standpoint, I kind of get it. For my workflow, I was able to work around it. Every time that I knew I was shooting in 4K 60, I would just make sure to have my widest lens available, which for me right now is a 24mm, and then I kind of just made it work from there. At some point, yeah, it would be more ideal to have like a 14 or a 16, like I was saying before, but I don't have that right now. So 24 it is, and I made it work. Now, the second biggest complaint that a lot of people have for this thing is overheating in video. I personally have not experienced that at all. Turning off the heat warning setting, and then making sure that the flip screen is out when you're recording, especially in 4K. 4K 60 is really where it usually happens, from what I read, and supposedly doing those two things is supposed to solve it. That's what I've been doing, and I've yet to have any kind of overheating issues in video. I told you about that a couple random times in photography, but for video, nothing. Now, overall, I think this might be my best purchase of 2022. Honestly, I mean, it hits everything I was looking for. I wanted a camera that shot in 4K with a good autofocus for it. Could shoot 4K 60 would be a plus, so I'm happy with that. Was great for photography because I wanted to do both photo and video work. Full frame, you know, it hits everything that I was looking for. It hits what a lot of people would use. I think for content creation in 2022, this camera is pretty much perfect. The potential overheating and the 4K 60 crop, it is annoying, but with all the other positives that you get out of this camera, for me personally, I think it's a deal.